Today we are going to be talking about low light houseplants, plants I have in my home that are not close to windows, they're not getting grow lights, and yet they are still doing really well for me, what I consider to be somewhat thriving, growing new leaves, and are still happy as a clam even though they are not in that sort of ideal bright indirect light sort of position in my home. Honestly, I think all of these are perfect for a lower light space, maybe like a north or east facing window, or even pulled back quite far in your home. I am very lucky that I have southwest facing windows, and while I do, it is still the UK. The weather here is not fantastic. I don't have tons and tons of light coming in, and so I do use a lot of grow lights, but not every single plant in my home can be underneath a grow light. I just don't have enough space for that. And so these are plants that I do not mind putting in a darker corner, and I know that they'll still be perfectly happy with me in those conditions and still put out some new growth. But before we get into it, I want to say, if you're new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet. So if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you are not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you returning. Now let's get into these plants. I have pulled them all out for you so I can show as many as I can here, but I will pop footage in of what they look like in their sort of normal everyday habitat so you can see sort of the level of light that they're getting on a regular basis. But I guess I'll start with the ones from this room. So actually just out of frame, so just there, next to my side of the bed is my bedside table, and I have two plants that live on that table. It is like 5-ish meters away from my window, very pulled back, gets no grow light, and yet these plants are still doing absolutely fine there. The first one I've got is my begonia white ice. This is one of my favorite begonias. It is a really, really cool one. It was actually the first begonia that I was able to get to grow well for me, ever. But since this one, I have found that cane begonias in general tend to be fairly tolerant to lower light situations. Not all of them. There's definitely some that like it more than others, but the white ice is one that I find is totally fine in that situation. You can see there are points when I had it in slightly brighter light where it's just a little bit brighter in the leaves. There's more silver, especially down the tips of the leaves. And at the top, where it is now, it's not as silver, but there isn't really a decrease in leaf size that I have experienced, and it is still growing quite a lot for me. It's very regularly pushing out new leaves, and I'm never really worried about it. In fact, I probably need to give it a bit of a chop. It has outgrown its trellis at this point. A chop and prop is maybe not long overdue, but definitely due soon, and I can put the cuttings back down into the bottom. I've done that about 1 billion times with this one. I've given cuttings to friends, and no matter where I put it in my home, it's been under grow lights, it's not been under grow lights, it doesn't really put up that much of a fuss. It might grow a tiny bit slower, but even still, I don't think like its internodal spacing is getting that much longer or anything. I'm not worried about it in the slightest, and it is doing really well in that spot over there. And then next to it, I have this guy. This is my sansevieria metallica, and sansevieria, or they've been reclassified as dracaena, dracaena trifasciata, I think they are. These guys are typically fairly low light tolerant, and I say tolerant because you can tell mine has grown quite tall. And basically all of this really tall growth, that occurred when it was underneath a grow light, but it has been living perfectly fine and actually still putting out new growth. Like this leaf is new since it has been in that spot by my bed, and like it might not grow as tall, but it is still perfectly happy in that zone and isn't mad that I've got it so far away from any sort of real light. And it's like, I'm just never worried about it. In general, I don't worry about my snake plants, and that's one thing I love about them. They're very hardy. I don't water them probably as much as I should, but they're fine with it. They're just one of those like unkillable houseplants. And I know, yes, you can totally kill them. I have killed snake plants previously, but in general, they are really chill, and I don't worry about putting them in a lower light spot. Of course, they would probably love being somewhere a little bit brighter, and like I said, I've had it in a brighter spot, but I don't feel like I necessarily need to keep it there in order for it to continue growing and being a happy plant. So I really like having that in a dark spot. I don't mind. I have some different sansevierias in brighter spots in my home, but this one, now that it's gotten quite tall, I feel like I can keep it in low light, and it's not going to grow out of control. I kind of use low light to manage the growth on this one a little bit. Also in this room, I've got a couple of hoyas that normally live above my desk there, and that is a spot that does not get grow light sort of at all, and I am using that strategically with these hoyas in order to maintain the sort of coloration on them. So the first one I've got here is my Hoya polyneura, and I really like the depth of the green in these leaves. It's really nice and dark, and I don't know, I feel like if I put this into a higher light spot, it would definitely bleach out the leaves a little bit. When I show you the pubicalyx in a second, you'll see the sort of difference in color on the leaves, and I don't want that to happen to my polyneura here. That being said, if I wanted it to flower, both my pubicalyx and my polyneura, if I wanted them to flower, I could put them into brighter spots. Abso-freaking-lutely. But I do not feel the need to do that for these ones in my home. I'd rather preserve the sort of coloration on them than get them to flower. I have had this one flower once. It's got really beautiful blooms, but I don't feel like I need it to. I've kind of got these for the foliage first and foremost, and so I just prefer that. Also, you can get ones that are more variegated, whether it's inner or outer variegated, or the sort of brogée, which is the really splashy polyneura. Those I would put in a brighter spot. I've got the brogée in my IKEA cabinet, and to be honest, I actually think the light might be a little bit too bright for it there. I've been watching it and it has looked a little bit sun bleached. Maybe I'll move it to a slightly darker spot soon, even though I feel, I don't know, I'm just gonna move it. I should just move it. But the other one I've got here is my Hoya pubicalyx mixed pot. It's got so many different types of pubicalyx in here. And for a while, this one was living in my window, in as much sun and light as I could possibly give it in my UK home. It was even if I had closed the curtains, it was between the curtains and the window. It was getting bright light as much as possible. And it has caused this one to be a lot more of a lighter green color. You can kind of tell. So I know you can get pubicalyx to grow a lot darker, sort of closer in color to the polyneura I've got. But because this one was in such a light spot, it got really bright and light, and that's something that isn't my ideal for this one. I really love the contrast because it is so gorgeous and splashy. I like seeing that contrast between that and the sort of darker leaves a little bit more. That's kind of a better one. And because I prefer that for this one, I have pulled it out of that sort of brighter spot. It is technically really close to a window, but it gets hidden behind the curtains, and during the day there's no sort of grow light on it or anything to give it an extra boost. And it is still growing very well. It's actually just put out this little tendril and some new leaves. I think this is the Royal Hawaiian Purple pubicalyx, if I can get it to focus on that. Yeah. Which new leaves come in this gorgeous purple color. So this one would again probably be okay in a brighter spot. I'm just growing it in a darker place in order to keep it a little bit darker and more contrasty. I like the contrast. That's what I like about this plant. Also in this room is one that I genuinely can't take down because it is literally attached to my ceiling, is my satin pothos plant, or scindapsus argyraeus. That one, it is again 5-6 meters away, pulled as far back as possible from my window, and it is still growing. I do have it growing along a beam towards the window, so the closest point is probably 3.5-4 meters, but that still is very, very far. And especially during the summer when we have the most daylight possible. The sun is high enough in the sky that it's never going to be getting light. I don't think I've ever seen sunlight on that plant, and it is still absolutely fine and perfectly happy in that spot. It is still growing for me, it is still producing new leaves, and I've just been trailing it back and forth along that beam, and it is super duper happy with that. I'm just like slowly filling out this beam area. And then I've got one plant that lives in the hallway of our home, which is even further than our bedroom. There are no windows, nothing. This gets the least amount of light in my entire home. And I have a plant on a table in there because I can't possibly have any sort of space without plants. And I got this one specifically for that spot because I knew that a cast iron plant or an Aspidistra elateor could handle that sort of darkness in my home. So this one is one I bought specifically for it. It's a variegated version, which I think is a little bit of fun. It's kind of half and half, really. It's got a non-variegated and a variegated side. I also have a huge pot full of different kinds, some variegated, some Milky Way, and some normal in the living room, which is, again, very far pulled back from a window and is perfectly fine in that spot. But this one in particular, I wanted to show you because it is literally putting out new growth in there. Even though it is in the darkest spot in my home, it is putting out new leaves and it is happy, which is kind of crazy. Like, you wouldn't think that a plant would be fine in that spot. And it's not getting no light. I need to preface that. There is still like the tiniest bit of ambient light there, but it's probably not getting enough to keep most other plants satiated. But like I said, that's why I got the cast iron plant. It can tolerate so much. It can also tolerate massive ranges of like temperature. It doesn't need any extra humidity. It's pet safe. It's probably one of the chillest plants in my experience. I would say this one's even more unkillable than the snake plant or the sansevieria, because it can just tolerate so much more and be perfectly happy. Like I said, I have the other one in my living room, and that one, I noticed the other day, is also putting out new growth, and that one's, again, 4 or 5 meters away from a window. And so the fact that they're still putting out new growth just shows to me that they are not unhappy, that they're perfectly fine in the sort of situation they're in, and really, they're still doing it. They're still working hard and doing great things for me. So I'm very proud of them. I absolutely love a cast iron plant. In my kitchen, I've got a northwest facing window, which in theory could get an okay amount of light, maybe some afternoon sun, but it's also blocked by like a massive tree. And so the most that window could hope for is like occasional dappled light in like a couple months of the year, maybe the highest bit of summer. But for most of the time, that window gets no sort of light that other plants might want. But yet I've got 2 plants in there, and they are both absolutely thriving, which I think is kind of crazy. The first one here is my dracaena, and I've actually put a new dracaena in there since I have shown it last. I got this one on a job, and so I decided to like put it in to like make this a slightly fuller plant. But the top one I've got up here is my Dracaena White Jewel, and I've had this one for ages, probably like 5 or 6 years, and I have never put it in a spot in my home that is great for light, and it has been perfectly fine with that and not complained one bit. And so when I had the opportunity to get a second one and pop it in the bottom, I don't think this is a white jewel, it's another sort of Dracaena fragrans, but again, it's a really cool one. I love the sort of white stripes. You can also get so many different types of Dracaena. There's like the marginata ones with the thinner leaves, as well as the fragrance ones like this that have like more yellowy leaves or like lime green streaks on them. There's lots of really cool options out there, and so you can kind of find the Dracaena that fits your sort of home decor and vibe. For me, it's the ones with these white variegation in them, sort of pin racing stripes. I think they're really cool, and like I said, perfectly fine in lower light, totally tolerant, and it is still growing. Also this one, because it's in my kitchen, the leaves kind of, I have recently washed it when I did this whole repot, but the leaves kind of get that like oily film that just like generally accumulates in my kitchen, in most kitchens, just because there's like oil condensation. I don't know what it's called, but like it just gets a little bit oily and then the dust sticks to it. And so this plant is dirty more often than not, and I rarely wipe its leaves. And again, it is still absolutely fine with that, still putting out new growth and not even dropping bottom leaves or anything, which I think is great. It's just a fantastic option, and I really freaking love it. Though I would say this one is not pet safe. There's several in here that aren't pet safe, but dracaenas, they are toxic, and I find that Cleo specifically likes to go for this sort of one because these things kind of look like her toys. So I try and keep her away from that one if possible, just because it's not ideal. Given she's very good about my houseplants, she really doesn't care that much about them. She's never really cared, so I don't need to worry about it. But the ones she did try and go for were always my dracaenas, so try and avoid that if possible. But next to my dracaena, in the kitchen window, is this absolute beast. Which I actually broke off a massive piece of when bringing it in here, so I need to like pop this into water for some propagating. But this is my begonia corallina de lucerna, and holy cow, she's an absolute freaking beast. And I've never grown this one anywhere except for my kitchen window. She's doing this, which is crazy. Like, again, this is just another testament to how well cane begonias can do in lower light environments, especially these ones. I think partially because it's got like quite large leaves, it can take a lot of light in out of not very much and still photosynthesize well, and it doesn't have too many spots to like not photosynthesize in, because in general, the plants with bigger leaves and darker leaves will do better in darker locations because they have more surface area of the leaf to photosynthesize. Anything with sort of variegation in it, those white parts of the leaf, they don't have chlorophyll. That's how it's variegated. And the chlorophyll is needed for photosynthesis and energy production in the plant. And so anywhere where there's lighter spots in the leaves, those aren't going to photosynthesize at all or as well, and won't be producing energy. So things with bigger, darker leaves tend to be more tolerant to lower light. That being said, I don't think this one is a particularly dark plant. I have begonias that are so much darker than this, and this one is still perfectly happy. It's outgrown this spot. I need to probably chop and prop it again. I can't even show you the whole thing from this angle just because it is so big and bushy. I've chopped and propped this about 1,000 times. It is still growing these absolute huge leaves, and I'm in love with this plant. This is, it makes me so happy. Now it's like a huge, massive plant that I'm gonna need to chop and prop again and again and again, because I don't have very many places that a plant that big can fit within my home. And like, that's it in low light. Imagine it in something like bright. Actually, I don't even think it would do very well in super bright light because I think the leaves wouldn't like it very much. I think they would get a bit bleached and be unhappy. I think it quite likes the low light situation it's in. Maybe I'm just projecting, but I think it likes it there. I also have a couple of houseplants that live on top of my Millsbo cabinet, so not in the cabinet, getting grow light literally all the time, but on top, which is pulled back from a window, kind of tucked to the side, where no light, no sunlight is getting on these plants ever. They get a tiny bit of indirect, but like I really would not count it as a highlight space. And I've had some plants growing up there previously that the light was too low for. Like my Christmas cactus, my Thanksgiving cactus, that was up there before. It did not grow a single inch in the time I had it in that space, which was like a year, but I've moved it to a brighter spot and now it's growing. I still have some plants growing up there and they're absolutely fine in that location. The first of which is my aglaonema. This is my aglaonema silver bay. It's actually my only aglaonema, I think, at the minute, as far as I know. Yeah, it's my only one. I've had several different kinds in the past, but I've basically decided I like the small one. I like how beautiful and silver it is. These leaves are a beautiful silvery blue, and it doesn't get too big. And like I said with a lot of these other plants, I'm sure if I put it in a brighter location or underneath the grow light, it could grow faster and bigger. I don't want it to do that. I don't have space for loads of massive aglaonemas, but this one is still growing. I noticed this the other day. It's putting out a new leaf. So it is happy enough in this spot that it is still growing and thriving and giving me nice new leaves. I'm excited to see what that one comes out as. It's on top of the cabinet. It's getting nothing. I also forget to water things up there, unfortunately, and so it might, I neglect this one, really. But Chinese evergreen aglaonemas tend to be very okay with it. Again, they can tolerate quite a lot of neglect, unfortunately. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for them. But they can tolerate quite a lot of neglect and still be perfectly happy campers in their little low light spots. Next to that, on top of the cabinet, is my scindapsus exotica. And this one, you could say it gets like a little bit of grow light because it trails down the side of the cabinet, but I like to think it's getting enough, but I think it's almost negligible because it's blocked by so many other plants in there that it's really not getting much. But again, this one is doing really, really well. It's still growing for me. Again, I've chopped and propped it several times over, and it is really happy in there. It's still growing these really big, beautiful silvery leaves. I feel like this is another example of having a dark leafed plant be quite okay in a lower light situation. These leaves tend to be fairly dark. I know they've got the silver in them, though I'm not sure. Someone please tell me if you know. I'm not sure if the silver in scindapsus works the same as like white variegation in other plants, because you can get variegated scindapsus, which has like actual white spots where it looks like there's no chlorophyll. Like, is there chlorophyll in the silver parts of this plant? If anyone knows, let me know. I'd be very curious to know, because I don't. It's just another really chill one. And scindapsus in general tend to be very happy with minimal light. I have my mixed pot of uncommon ones above my bed. That spot does have a grow light that goes on, I think, an hour before sunset. So in the winter, a lot more than in the summer, but for the most part in the day, it's not getting very much. But because it has a grow light on it, at least some part of the day, I didn't want to include it in this because it is getting some benefit from it. But this one here isn't getting any sort of reliable grow light, maybe the tiniest bit through the glass of my cabinet, but I really would not bank on it for light. And then last off, we have some plants in the office, which in general, I have very much so kitted out with grow lights. I have kitted out most of my home with grow lights, let's be honest. I like having the grow lights. I use them instead of the big lights in my home. I'm a big light hater, so I'd much rather have grow lights on because then it helps my plants and it benefits me by letting me see in my home. But I do have a couple spots on Joe's desk that do not get any sort of light. They're recessed from a window, and so they cannot get any sort of natural light there. And one thing I have in that corner, which is an absolute staple, and pretty much probably on every low light plant list, this guy is the ZZ Raven. And as you can tell by the sort of light green portions I have of this plant, it's growing loads! Like, so many new shoots have recently popped up on this one, and it is before they have gone and like faded to the sort of dark green color that they get to, because they will fade to this dark black, which I love. But I really like that you can see the contrast when new growth is coming in, because it just makes it easier to see. It makes it easier to differentiate when I am getting new growth and I can tell, as opposed to if it came in dark, you wouldn't be able to tell at all. But I think this one, again, is one of those that, because it's got such dark leaves, it can photosynthesize quite a lot. And also, I keep this one extremely dusty. I say I keep it. I let it get and stay super dusty a lot of the time. I find the ZZ very difficult to dust because it's leaves. It's got so many small leaves, and so it's hard to get into every one of them. And so not only is this in a very dark corner, it is dusty as well, yet it is still absolutely doing its thing, pushing out new growth very, very regularly, giving me these lovely green leaves, which will slowly fade into the black ones. And then next to that one, I have another plant that I didn't pull because it is a little bit big and I couldn't be bothered, to be honest. It is my alocasia poly. It is a huge alocasia, and it is so chill in that spot. That one gets probably a little bit more light because it's not quite as tucked into the corner as my ZZ, so it gets like ever so slightly more light, but it is still not getting any sort of grow light, just existing in my home in a fairly dark corner and being absolutely fine and putting out new big leaves and being very happy there. So I really love it. It's one of my favorite alocasias, and I love that it can tolerate not being in a very bright spot, because I have almost all of my alocasias, one, under grow lights, but two, a lot of them in a sort of humid, sort of more terrarium conditions. That one, I do not have it in that space, and it is still pushing out leaf after leaf and growing really, really well for me in a dark, sort of average home humidity sort of way, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, those are some of my favorite low light tolerating houseplants, plants that I could put in pretty much any corner of my home and would still be perfectly happy. And I do. I literally put all of these in dark corners and they're fine. So it means that you probably can too, and it'll be okay. Before I sign off though, I want to say a huge thank you to the newest member of my Good Growing fam over on Patreon, Avery. Thank you so much for joining. I really hope you enjoy the bonus content and the live chats and access to the Discord server and all of the fun things that come with a Patreon membership. If anyone else is interested in joining, it is £3 a month, and you can think about that as like buying me a cup of coffee once a month or running one of my grow lights each month for the plants that aren't these ones that need the grow lights, because that's about how much it costs to run each of them. Totally don't worry if that's not your thing. It's there if you want it, and ignore it if you don't. But otherwise, everyone else here, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future. If I mention anything in this video and you want to know more on it, let me know and I can hopefully make that happen. And subscribe for more. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to keep growing. Bye!